14, and it looks like today we will be starting in verse 5. All right. Proverbs 14:5, a faithful witness does not lie, but a false witness will utter lies. And if you didn't know, now you do. A scoffer seeks wisdom and does not find it, but knowledge is easy to him who understands. You know, Peter says that in the last days, scoffers will come walking according to their own lusts, and that they'll be willfully ignorant of the truth. And I think you could see a tie there, this idea that knowledge won't really come to someone who isn't really seeking knowledge. Maybe they're just seeking justification. Maybe they're just seeking ammo for their agenda. Go from the presence of a foolish man when you do not perceive in him the lips of knowledge. So I actually have a color coding in my Proverbs verses, and one color is for family and for relationships. And this is a relationship one where it just talks about when you realize that there's a foolish person. And remember, in the book of Proverbs, in Psalms, really in the poetic books, and kind of just across the Bible, really, a fool, it's talking of an unbeliever. It's talking about someone who does not do God's ways, but the world's ways. And so should you be hanging out a lot of your own will and choice with foolish people who don't have knowledge, and they're probably going to be influencing you with a whole lot of other stuff. Verse 8, the wisdom of the prudent is to understand his way, but the folly of fools is deceit. So the prudent, the wise, they know what they're doing and they understand it. Fools mock at sin, but among the upright there is favor. The heart knows its own bitterness, and a stranger does not share in its joy. The house of the wicked will be overthrown, but the tent of the righteous will flourish. This little section here is just a bunch of back-to-back, just general wisdom proverbs, just general ideas of wickedness and righteousness, of wisdom and foolishness. But in verse 12 it says, there is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death. And so that's, I think, an important thing here, is that there's a way, a belief system, a way of handling your life, and it seems right to a man, but its way is death. And that's the thing, is that rather than doing what people seem is right, seems good to us, doing what God says, doing what God has declared. The world is full of a lot of opinions and just very few facts these days. That's the idea. So many people have their reasons and their thoughts and their ideas rather than just God's reasons, God's thoughts, God's ideas. And so that's leading to death when people just do things the way they think it should be done. Even in laughter, the heart may sorrow, and the end of mirth may be grief. Just that idea that, you can actually have a person who's laughing on the outside, but on the inside, it's not so. And, you can go through a season of depression where that doesn't mean you're depressed 100% of the time. Oftentimes you can go around friends or something and it's like you're happy for the moment. And then it's like, but once they're gone, it's like you're right back where you started again. Maybe that's a good time to just surround yourself with friends. Maybe that's what you need to get out of that slump. But the idea is that, that the sorrow can still be there even in those moments of laughter. The backslider in heart will be filled with his own ways, but a good man will be satisfied from above. There we go again. Backsliding. It's a phrase that we as Christians use. Here it is in the Bible. The backslider in heart. So it's not just their actions. It's their hearts that have backslidden. It's when your heart backslides that your actions begin to backslide. Can't remember word for word what he said, but Leonard Ravenhill, I know, has had a I think I've heard the same thing more than once, but heard it multiple times from him. Just the idea that backslidden. What is backslidden? It's like, backslidden isn't falling into drunkenness and depression and despair or quitting church. He goes, no, that's the product of a long season of backsliding. The backsliding is when the heart first began to waver. Backsliding is when the morning devotion stopped. Backsliding is when the time in the Word stopped. People backslide, and then all this other stuff happens. And so the backslider in heart will be filled with his own ways. And that's often what happens, is we backslide in our duties and in the things that bring us health with the Lord, and we start filling them with our own ways. And it doesn't matter what we fill them with if we're backsliding. It doesn't matter how wholesome the things we fill them with are, because there's a lot of wholesome hobbies that are not wrong in and of themselves. But when we start filling our hearts with our own ways and our own desires, we begin to backslide. And it says, right, but a good man will be satisfied from above. And the idea there is that what satisfies your heart? What is the thing that your heart longs for? I think when our heart ceases to long for the Lord, that's a sign of backsliding. It's not the wicked sin that's the backsliding. It's the heart losing its love for the Lord. That's the backsliding. And so we need to keep an eye on our hearts. Oop, pick my camera. Set watch on our hearts, because they're wicked and deceitful. Who can know it? And that was actually something, I went on a walk and I was listening to a sermon. And right, the heart is wicked and deceitful above all things. Who can know it? John, right, 2:25, right? For he knew what was in man. Speaking of Jesus. And so, who can know it? God knows it. God knows what's in your heart. And he knows when your heart's on fire, and he knows when your heart is cold. The backslider in heart will be filled with his own ways. People are going to fill up their time, and they're going to seek their joy from their own ways. But a good man will be satisfied from above. A good man will be satisfied with the Lord. And so it's a good heart check for us, just to remind us the why behind the things we do. Am I satisfied with the Lord? Do I actually get joy? For what it's worth, again, it's funny how there are things that check our hearts. And because they check our hearts, they naturally make us defensive, especially if there's a heart problem. Last night, the youth were asking, we did like some Q&A time, and there was a question on tithing. And one thing I always bring up when it comes to tithing is this. Even if finances wasn't the issue here, right? The reality is that when you start challenging someone in their giving, what you often do is you unearth a heart problem. It's not that the money's even the problem. Like the church needs the money. It's like, no, but the unwillingness to give is obviously sometimes a sign of the heart. It's not that you have to go to all these church services or that you're a worse Christian because you stopped going to whatever. But the moment you stopped desiring to go to a church service that you used to enjoy to go to, what changed? Did the church service dramatically change? I had a talk with a pastor friend. Well, most of you guys know Dallas. And we were just talking about on our drive yesterday. He was like, yeah, and this guy's just like, I'm not feeling this church service anymore. But I'm pretty sure Dallas's service hasn't changed. So what changed? It was the heart of the person. So It's our hearts we got to keep an eye on, because that's the backsliding. And so these are things. Reluctant to give. It's usually a heart problem, or an idol problem. Reluctant to, I don't feel like going to that service anymore. Did the service change? Or did you change? Now life changes. Circumstances change. So I'm not saying if you stop going to church service that maybe there's a very legitimate reason. And maybe your legitimate reason was a good justification for a lingering heart problem. So once again, there's all these little things. There's these small choices we make. And at the end of the day, we can justify ourselves. I'm sure if you need to justify yourself, you can come up with a justification. But if you want God to search your heart and know it, and to try you, and to reveal to you your ways, and to lead you in his way everlasting, then don't be afraid to look and say, okay, Lord, why am I doing this? Or why did I stop doing this? And he might reveal. Your eyes are dry and your heart has become hard, right? I mean, that's the idea. So, all right. I think it went longer than I was intending there, but love you guys. Hope your hearts are all in the right place. And if not, go hang around the people. That's what we talked about a little moment ago. That maybe bring that Christian joy back to you. Surround yourself with them.